Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fami Al Fatima from SMA Negeri 1 Banjarnegara, and today I'm participating in NSDC 2026 as the opposition team. And today's debate motion is: this House regrets the establishment of cash cow programs in tertiary educational institution. And studying as the opposition, we strongly oppose today's motion. At the core of today's debate, the proposition wants you to believe that cash cow programs are the reason education has become unequal, capitalistic, and inaccessible. But we believe they misunderstand the real problem, because the real problem is not the existence of revenue-generating programs, because the real problem is that universities around the world are increasingly underfunded while the demand for higher education continues to rise. And in that reality, cash cow programs are not perfect, but they are often necessary for universities to survive, to maintain quality, and continue supporting their students. And before moving further, let us be very clear about our stance. We, as the opposition team, are not defending scam universities or fake degrees. Predatory institutions absolutely should be regulated, but this motion doesn't only target scams. This motion regrets the existence of revenue-generating programs as a whole, including legitimate programs offered by credible universities. And that is where proposition fails. Ladies and gentlemen, the biggest weakness in proposition's case is simple. They spend the entire speech attacking the problem in education, but they never explain how universities realistically survive without these programs. They say universities should find other ways, but what ways? The government across the world already struggle with funding in healthcare and then infrastructure, welfare, and public services. To suddenly assume governments can fully fund universities is very unrealistic. They also suggest universities should create businesses instead, but we must remember that universities are educational institutions, not a giant corporation. So the proposition removes a major funding source without providing a realistic replacement. And in debate, that is very matters, because we compare real words, not just fantasies. And now let's move to our substantive arguments. The first one, cash cow programs help sustain universities and protect a broader educational access. Universities are extremely expensive to run. They must pay lecturers and researchers, then laboratory costs, scholarships, technology, libraries, student facilities, and many other operational expenses. But where does this money come from? In many cases, high-paying programs generate surplus revenue that universities then use to support the rest of the institution, and this is called as cross-subsidization. The students who can afford premium programs indirectly help fund for scholarship for poor students, and then lower cost departments, research programs, campus services, and better facilities for everyone. But proposition completely ignores this reality. They assume that if cash cow programs disappear, universities somehow become more accessible. But in reality, the opposite can happen. Without additional revenue, the universities may increase tuition for all of the students and then reduce scholarships, cutting some departments, or lower educational quality. So ironically, removing these programs can hurt middle and lower income students even more. Ladies and gentlemen, our second argument is that proposition confuses expensive education with meaningless education. Throughout their speech, they repeatedly imply that rich people can simply buy degrees, but that is an oversimplification. A degree alone never guarantees someone can be successful. Employers still care about competence, about internships, communication skills, portfolios, and actual performance, especially in fields like engineering, medicine, computer science, or business, and then students still need to prove their abilities before can working in a company. Many expensive programs are academically rigorous and globally respected, and even if some institutions abuse the system, that is a regulatory problem, not proof that all revenue-generating programs are harmful. By their logic, any expensive educational program automatically becomes immoral, and that is truly unreasonable. The third, proposition attacks the symptoms instead of solving the root problem. They blame the cash cow programs for inequality in education, but inequality already existed long before these programs became common. The real causes are unequal school systems, poverty, weak public funding, wage inequality, and limited social mobility. By removing cash cow programs, it doesn't solve any of these structural problems. poor students do not suddenly become rich, then governments do not suddenly gain unlimited funding. Universities do not magically become free. Instead, universities simply lose one of their major financial supports, and when institutions lose funding, everyone suffers because there will be fewer opportunities, fewer scholarships, fewer research innovation, lower educational quality. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition also says universities become greedy, but universities needing sustainable revenue doesn't automatically make them immoral, because education still requires money to function. By research require money, and then facilities require money, quality professors require money. The opposition is simply being realistic about how institutions survive in the real world. And finally, let us compare the two worlds. In proposition's world, the universities lose major funding sources, yet governments are somehow expected to fully compensate despite limited budgets. This will create financial instability, reduced educational quality, fewer scholarship, and fewer opportunities overall. Meanwhile, in our world, in opposition, wealthier students voluntarily pay premium tuition, which helps universities continue operating and supporting broader educational system. Our side is more sustainable, more realistic, and ultimately more beneficial for students as a whole. Because this debate should not only be about whether profit exists in education or not, it should be about whether universities can continue functioning, researching, and educating millions of students in a financially sustainable way. Cash cow programs are not perfect, but removing them without realistic alternatives harms universities and students far more than it helps them. For all these reasons, we proudly stand on the opposition. Thank you.